My name is Firoze Manji. I'm the publisher of Daraja Press, a radical uh, press giving voice to the global south. Um, I'm from Kenya, but now reside in Quebec, in the western part of Canada, of Quebec province. I'd read uh, Ken Saro-Wiwa's works over many years. Like many Nigerians, he had a control of language, of the English language, uh, and 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 used it to mock empire and to mock neo-colonial situations. Not afraid to use the way in which English is appropriated in Africa by different communities. That which oppresses you is eventually appropriated as a defense. I mean, for example, to be queer was an insult. It was appropriated as something to be proud of, okay, as a militant. And I think Ken used language in that way. He appropriated it and gave it purpose for telling. Well, like many Nigerian authors, telling it from a different perspective, and not being afraid to write in what the empire would call patois, or but it isn't. It's the reconstruction of a new language, and I thought that was always for me a remarkable thing. And watching a play that's taken up his writings, you think, wow, this really this is real organic poetry, organic language, and I think that reflected his militant position. And unlike many militants, Ken seemed to have a really important quality, and that is the capacity to listen and to hear and to then reflect what he is learning, rather than being there as the preacher to tell people. I think the best of artists are seeking a connection with humanity, a way of giving expression, because all of us have been dehumanized by our histories. And therefore, artists seek to break away from that imprisonment to find that connection with humanity. And when they do, then they spark something. People both discover the possibilities of their own humanity and a recognition of their inhumanity. I was in London at the Amnesty International headquarters, in my office, and people stormed in saying, "They've killed him! They've killed him!" And we were on the phone, we were calling people, we were trying to find out. And in a sense, both shocked but not surprised. We knew, and we were campaigning on the release of Ken Saro-Wiwa and his colleagues. People keep blaming Abacha for the assassination of Ken and his colleagues. But this was inspired by the relationship with empire and relationship with the transnational corporations which run empire. It's in a long line of empire, of the murdering, the concentration camps, the mass killings, the torture that happened in Kenya in its struggle for independence in the 1950s, and in many other parts of the world across the continent as well. And I think this is a really important parallel here because the genocide in or the most recent genocide in Palestine started by the destruction of culture, of museums, of universities, of schools, of cultural institutions, etc. That the destruction of culture is a fundamental part of the destruction of a society, the elimination of its history, and without a history, there isn't a future. And I think Ken was talking about that very phenomenon in his writings. I think, and his actions, and that this is an assault on our history, on our culture, on our beliefs, our values, and so on. On a micro scale, this was a form of genocide that was taking place in the Niger Delta. Some years later, um, I was contacted by the university in Ireland, who asked if we would be willing. They had received uh, copies of correspondence with Ken Saro-Wiwa, um, and they asked if we would be interested in publishing that book. And so, how could I say no? And the Raja Press had only just been established, and our first two books, the first one was on the legacy of Amilcar Cabral, and the second one was the last writings of Ken Saro-Wiwa. And for me, I was extremely proud to be able to do that, uh, to nurture some reflections on people, to recognize Ken not merely as a writer and poet, but somebody who stood up for his values and was sacrificed for those. And I think when I many years later visited the Niger Delta and really struck by the fact that Ken continues to live. He is still there. The young people hold him in with great respect. We went there and did a launch of the book, and the reception was amazing. I mean, there were so many young people who wanted to know more about it and who knew about it and who um, who suffer the destruction of that environment. And I was very lucky. I was taken by Nimo Basi to the Niger Delta, and again, it was a real learning experience. You read about the environmental destruction, but when you see it, and that's what Ken did. He saw it. He listened. He gave expression uh, to. I think really importantly. I mean, before his time, in a sense that he understood that humans are part of nature. It isn't just natural destruction of nature separate from humans. but that humans are part of nature, and what was being destroyed was a people and its history. It wasn't merely destruction of an environment. I think Ken and his colleagues really understood that. Uh, and so this was a fight for a survival of a people, not merely a survival of a physical territory. What Ken and his colleagues were doing was to reassert that the Ogoni people are humans, and that their creativity and the way they organize was a way of inventing what it means to be human. And it's the same resilience that you see today in Palestine.